a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Blade Runner. Blade Runner is a 1982 American neo-noir science fiction film directed by Ridley Scott, written by Hampton, Fancher and David Peoples, and starring Harrison Ford, Rutger Hauer, Sean Young, and Edward James Olmos. It is a loose adaptation of Philip K. Dick's novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? The film is set in a dystopian future Los Angeles of 2019, in which synthetic humans known as replicants are bioengineered by the powerful Tyrell Corporation to work on off-world colonies. When a fugitive group of replicants led by Roy Batty escapes back to Earth, burnt-out cop Rick Deckard reluctantly agrees to hunt them down. Blade Runner initially underperformed in North American theaters and polarized critics. Some praised its thematic complexity and visuals, while others were displeased with its unconventional pacing and plot. It later became an acclaimed cult film regarded as one of the all-time best science fiction movies. Hailed for its production design depicting a retrofitted future, Blade Runner is a leading example of neo-noir cinema. The soundtrack, composed by Vangelis, was nominated in 1983 for a BAFTA and a Golden Globe as Best Original Score. The film has influenced many science fiction films, video games, anime, and television series. It brought the work of Philip K. Dick to the attention of Hollywood, and several later big-budget films were based on his work. In the year after its release, Blade Runner won the Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation, and in 1993 it was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. A sequel, Blade Runner 2049, was released in October 2017. 7 versions of Blade Runner exist as a result of controversial changes made at the request of studio executives. A director's cut was released in 1992 after a strong response to test screenings of a work print. This, in conjunction with the film's popularity as a video rental, made it one of the earliest movies to be released on DVD. In 2007, Warner Bros. Released the final cut, a 25th anniversary digitally remastered version, and the only version over which Scott retained artistic control. Plot. In 2019 Los Angeles, former police officer Rick Deckard is detained by Officer Gaff, and brought to his former supervisor, Bryant Deckard, whose job as a Blade Runner was to track down bioengineered beings known as replicants and retire them. Is informed that 4 are on Earth illegally. Deckard starts to leave, but Bryant ambiguously threatens him, and he stays. The two watch a video of a Blade Runner named Holden administering the Fortkampf test, which is designed to distinguish replicants from humans based on their emotional response to questions. The test subject, Leon, shoots Holden on the second question. Bryant wants Deckard to retire Leon and the other 3 Tyrell Corporation Nexus 6 replicants. Roy Batty, Zora, and Priscilla Bryant has Deckard meet with Eldon Tyrell so he can administer the test on a Nexus 6 to see if it works. Tyrell expresses his interest in seeing the test fail first, and asks him to administer it on his assistant Rachel. After a much longer than standard test, Deckard concludes that Rachel is a replicant who believes she is human. Tyrell explains that she is an experiment who has been given false memories to provide an emotional cushion. Searching Leon's hotel room, Deckard finds photos and a synthetic snake scale. Roy and Leon investigate a replicant eye manufacturing laboratory and learn of J.F. Sebastian, a gifted genetic designer who works closely with Tyrell. Deckard returns to his apartment where Rachel is waiting. She tries to prove her humanity by showing him a family photo. But after Deckard reveals that her memories are implants from Tyrell's niece, she leaves his apartment. Meanwhile, pre-locates Sebastian and manipulates him to gain his trust. A photograph from Leon's apartment and the snake scale lead Deckard to a strip club, where Zora works. After a confrontation and chase, Deckard kills Zora. Bryant orders him also to retire Rachel, who has disappeared from the Tyrell Corporation. After Deckard spots Rachel in a crowd, he is attacked by Leon, who knocks Deckard's pistol out of his hand, and attempts to kill Deckard. But Rachel uses Deckard's pistol to kill Leon. They return to Deckard's apartment, and, during an intimate discussion, he promises not to track her down. As she abruptly tries to leave, Deckard restrains her, making her kiss him. Arriving at Sebastian's apartment, Roy tells Pre that the others are dead. Sympathetic to their plight, Sebastian reveals that, because of Methuselah syndrome, a genetic premature aging disorder, his life will also be cut short. Sebastian and Roy gain entrance into Tyrell's secure penthouse, where Roy demands more life from his maker. Tyrell tells him that it is impossible. Roy confesses that he has done questionable things, but Tyrell dismisses this, praising Roy's advanced design and accomplishments in his short life. Roy kisses Tyrell, then kills him. Sebastian runs for the elevator, followed by Roy, who rides the elevator down alone. Deckard is later told by Bryant that Sebastian was found dead at Sebastian's apartment. Deckard is ambushed by Pre, but he kills her as Roy returns. Roy's body begins to fail as the end of his lifespan nears. He chases Deckard through the building, ending on the roof. Deckard tries to jump to an adjacent roof, but is left hanging between buildings. Roy makes the jump with ease, and as Deckard's grip loosens, Roy hoists him onto the roof, saving him. Before Roy dies, he delivers a monologue about how his memories will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Gaff arrives and shouts to Deckard about Rachel. It's too bad she won't live, but then again, who does? Deckard returns to his apartment and finds Rachel asleep in his bed. As they leave, Deckard notices an origami unicorn on the floor, a calling card that recalls for him Gaff's earlier statement. Deckard and Rachel leave the apartment block. Themes. The film operates on multiple dramatic and narrative levels. It employs some of the conventions of film noir, among them the character of a femme fatale, narration by the protagonist, chiaroscuro cinematography, and giving the hero a questionable moral outlook extended to include reflections upon the nature of his own humanity. It is a literate science fiction film, thematically unfolding the philosophy of religion and moral implications of human mastery of genetic engineering in the context of classical Greek drama and hubris. It also draws on biblical images, such as Noah's flood, and literary sources, such as Frankenstein. Linguistically, the theme of mortality is subtly reiterated in the chess game between Sebastian and Tyrell, supposedly based on the famous Immortal Game of 1851. Blade Runner delves into the effects of technology on the environment and society by reaching to the past, using literature, religious symbolism, classical dramatic themes, and film noir techniques. This tension between past, present, and future is mirrored in the retrofitted future depicted in the film, one which is high-tech and gleaming in places, but decayed and outdated elsewhere. In an interview with The Observer in 2002, director Ridley Scott described the film as extremely dark, both literally and metaphorically, with an oddly masochistic feel. He also said that he liked the idea of exploring pain. In the wake of his brother's death from skin cancer, when he was ill, I used to go and visit him in London, and that was really traumatic for me. A sense of foreboding and paranoia pervades the world of the film. Corporate power looms large. The police seem omnipresent. Vehicle and warning lights probe into buildings, and the consequences of huge biomedical power over the individual are explored, especially regarding replicants' implanted memories. Control over the environment is exercised on a vast scale, and goes hand in hand with the absence of any natural life. For example, artificial animals stand in for their extinct predecessors. This oppressive backdrop explains the frequently referenced migration of humans to off-world colonies. The dystopian themes explored in Blade Runner are an early example of the expansion of cyberpunk concepts into cinema. Eyes are a recurring motif, as are manipulated images, calling into question the nature of reality and our ability to accurately perceive and remember it. These thematic elements provide an atmosphere of uncertainty for Blade Runner's central theme of examining humanity. In order to discover replicants, an empathy test is used, with a number of its questions focused on the treatment of animals, seemingly an essential indicator of one's humanity. The replicants appear to show compassion and concern for one another and are juxtaposed against human characters who lack empathy, while the massive humanity on the streets is cold and impersonal. The film goes so far as to question if Deckard might be an android, in the process forcing the audience to re-evaluate what it means to be human. The question of whether Deckard is intended to be a human or a replicant has been an ongoing controversy since the film's release. Both Michael Dealey and Harrison Ford wanted Deckard to be human, while Hampton Fancher preferred ambiguity. Ridley Scott has stated that in his vision, Deckard is a replicant. Deckard's unicorn dream sequence, inserted into the director's cut and concomitant with Gaff's parting gift of an origami unicorn, is seen by many as showing that Deckard is a replicant, because Gaff could have retrieved Deckard's implanted memories. The interpretation that Deckard is a replicant is challenged by others who believe the unicorn imagery shows that the characters, whether human or replicant, share the same dreams and recognize their affinity, or that the absence of a decisive answer is crucial to the film's main theme. The film's inherent ambiguity and uncertainty, as well as its textual richness, have permitted viewers to see it from multiple perspectives. Casting. Casting the film proved troublesome, particularly for the lead role of Deckard. Screenwriter Hampton Fancher envisioned Robert Mitchum as Deckard, and wrote the character's dialogue with Mitchum in mind. Director Ridley Scott and the film's producers spent months meeting and discussing the role with Dustin Hoffman, who eventually departed over differences in vision. Harrison Ford was ultimately chosen for several reasons, including his performance in the Star Wars films, Ford's interest in the Blade Runner story, and discussions with Steven Spielberg, who was finishing Raiders of the Lost Ark at the time and strongly praised Ford's work in the film. Following his success in films like Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark, Ford was looking for a role with dramatic depth. According to production documents, several actors were considered for the role, including Gene Hackman, Sean Connery, Jack Nicholson, Paul Newman, Clint Eastwood, Tommy Lee Jones, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Al Pacino, and Burt Reynolds. One role that was not difficult to cast was Rutger Hauer as Roy Batty, the violent yet thoughtful leader of the replicants. Scott cast Hauer without having met him, based solely on Hauer's performances in Paul Verhoeven's movies Scott had seen. Hauer's portrayal of Batty was regarded by Philip K. Dick as the perfect Batty: cold, Aryan, flawless. Of the many films Hauer has made, Blade Runner is his favorite. As he explained in a live chat in 2001, Blade Runner needs no explanation. It just, all of the best. There is nothing like it. To be part of a reel which changed the world's thinking, it's awesome. Hauer rewrote his character's Tears in Rain speech himself and presented the words to Scott on set prior to filming. Blade Runner used a number of then lesser-known actors. Sean Young portrays Rachel, an experimental replicant implanted with the memories of Tyrell's niece, causing her to believe she is human. Nina Axelrod auditioned for the role. Daryl Hannah portrays Pre, a basic pleasure model replicant. Stacey Nelkin auditioned for the role, but was given another part in the film, which was ultimately cut before filming. Casting Pre and Rachel was challenging, requiring several screen tests, with Morgan Paul playing the role of Deckard. Paul was cast as Deckard's fellow bounty hunter Holden based on his performances in the tests. Breon James portrays Leon Kowalski, a combat and laborer replicant, and Joanna Cassidy portrays Sora, an assassin replicant. Edward James Olmos portrays Gaff. Olmos used his diverse ethnic background and personal research to help create the fictional, city-speak language his character uses in the film. His initial address to Deckard at the Noodle Bar is partly in Hungarian and means, horse dick, bullshit, no way, you are the Blade. Blade Runner. M. Emmett Walsh plays Captain Bryant, a hard-drinking, sleazy, and underhanded police veteran typical of the film noir genre. Joe Turkel portrays Dr. Eldon Tyrell, a corporate mogul who built an empire on genetically manipulated humanoid slaves. William Sanderson was cast as J.F. Sebastian, a quiet and lonely genius who provides a compassionate yet compliant portrait of humanity. J.F. sympathizes with the replicants, whom he sees as companions, and he shares their shorter lifespan due to his rapid aging disease. Joe Pantoliano had earlier been considered for the role. James Hong portrays Hannibal Chew, an elderly geneticist specializing in synthetic eyes, and Henry Pike portrayed the sleazy bar owner Taffy Lewis in a single take, something almost unheard of with Scott, whose drive for perfection resulted at times in double-digit takes. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like